So, our first keynote speaker is Bishop Vincent Long. Bishop Vincent will be known to many of you through many different contexts, but my first memory of Bishop Vincent was meeting him in Papua New Guinea in perhaps 2019, where we had gone there with a group to visit people seeking asylum who were living in Port Moresby at the time, and also to visit West Papuan refugees from across the border there. And we had a great couple of days just trying to be in solidarity, and it was a wonderful time to meet Bishop Vincent and hear from him then, and I'm very excited to hear from him today. So he isn't just the Bishop of Parramatta, he's also chair of the Australian Bishops' Commission for Social Justice, Mission and Service. Many of you will know his story. Perhaps you have seen him on the ABC show Compass this year, or last year I should say. Look it up if you haven't seen it. It's a great show on Bishop Vincent's life. He's a conventual Franciscan friar. He studied for the priesthood here in Melbourne. He holds a licentiate in Christology and Spirituality from the Pontifical Faculty of St Bonaventure. He was elected Superior of the Order of Friars Minor Conventuals in Australia in 2005. He served as the Assistant General in Rome, and he was responsible for the Asia-Oceania section of his order. He was also previously Episcopal Vicar for Social Services here in the Archdiocese of Melbourne. And Bishop Vincent is the first Vietnamese-born bishop to lead a diocese outside Vietnam, and the first ever Vietnamese-born bishop in Australia. So just a really warm welcome to you, Bishop Vincent, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Josh, and good afternoon, friends. I'd like to begin by first acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather. I acknowledge their physical and spiritual connection to that land, their stories, their traditions, and their living cultures. And I also pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. It's a real privilege for me to join you at this Catholic Social Services National Conference, jointly with CSSA and CSSE, on the theme commonality and common good. It is a particularly pertinent theme as we are living at a time when the global structures are faltering precisely because of the alarming erosion of the ecological commons, the sense of commonality and common good. So the world needs more than ever the witness of a gospel-inspired community, which we are, united in our efforts to honor the dignity and the worth of every human person, to serve the common good and to live as one with all creation. I think it's fair to say that we are in an acute crisis, economically, politically, and ecologically. Pope Francis made a remark a couple of years ago, and it remains true today, I think. He said that the coronavirus pandemic has exposed our vulnerability. It has revealed the fallacy of individualism as the underlying, as the organizing principle of our society. It has given, it says, the lie, the mendacity to the myths of self-sufficiency that sanctions rampant inequalities and praise the ties that bind societies together. So the virus has instead demonstrated, it continues, our mutual dependency and common vulnerability. The selflessness of the dedication of doctors, nurses, healthcare, social workers, many of you included, involved in maintaining our essential services was a powerful demonstration of the necessity of those times. They remind us that our lives are gifts and that we grow by giving of ourselves, not by preserving ourselves, but losing ourselves in service of others, especially the most vulnerable among us. So what a silent contradiction to the individualism and self-obsession and lack of solidarity that so dominate our wealthy society. Francis appeals for the strengthening of our ties with our Creator God, creation, and with our fellow human beings. This is the new organizing principle needed to launch the planet towards a new and a better future. The COVID crisis can therefore become a Noah moment as long as we can find our way to the ark of the ties that unite us, of love and of a common belonging. We belong to God, we belong to one another, and we belong and are part of creation. So COVID taught us that no one is saved alone. That knowledge demands a new politics of inclusion and communion. It equips us to avoid both the excessive individualism and the aggressive populism that thrives on identifying enemies at home and abroad. Fraternity, the Pope insists, is the new frontier, capable of knitting together the often competing demands of liberty and equality. In many ways, we no longer live in an egalitarian society that we are so proud of. Increasingly, it is an unequal society, or perhaps a socio-economic meritocracy, where you get what you deserve and you earn your way. It's a system that rewards people according to their abilities and achievements. The gap between the minimum wage earners and the big end of town salaries is a case in point. In large part, what has been revealed is the fragility of a social order that maximizes economic capital at the expense of social capital in its local and familial forms. We have become aware of the deep inequities along all lines of race, class, that cry out for justice, along with the increasingly obvious wounds that we have inflicted upon the natural order. All in all, what has been revealed is what happens when a social order maximizes the freedom of the unbounded individual to live without the constraints and virtues that feed us for life together in families and communities, and place us as stewards within the natural world. So that's just some introductory remarks that I made. Now, just moving on to some of the more meaty stuff. Focus on the human person. This conference is about the promotion of the common good in the face of the threats that undermine the social cohesion and the practice of public virtue. But invariably, the very notion of what constitutes the common good itself is often open for debate. Whose common good is the common good? In fact, which common good are you in favor of? the one that is advocated by a political party or an interest group? Think of the State Street tax cuts or any significant public policy. What is the ethical principle that underlies them? Who will be the beneficiaries and who will be disadvantaged through these legislations and public directions? Even if Middle Australia or the majority might gain the most from the distribution of public goods, the question must be asked as to whether or not we leave out the minority groups or other vulnerable people in our community. I noticed that the SSA put out a statement in support of the revised Stage 3 tax cuts by the Albanese government. And I'm personally in support of the revision, but the question remains is whether we need to do more for the vulnerable people in the exercise of the distribution of public goods or tax relief. The common good should not be equated with some kind of majoritarianism or utilitarianism. The common good, properly understood, is the set of conditions necessary for each and every member of the community to flourish. It cannot be collapsed into some kind of a majority's idea of the public interest, understood as either the interests of the majority or the outcome of their expressed will at the expense of the minority. This conception of the common good often leads to the battle of rights and the fight between individual and public good. One immediately think of the endless culture wars that are waged in our society, and unfortunately also within the church. It is a central tenet of the common good that there is no conflict between the good of the majority and the good of the minority, once both are properly understood. This is because the good of an individual cannot be separate from the good of the community. My life is better when my friends' lives are better. My membership within a civic community grounds the bonds of a civic friendship that connects all members of the polity. It is our shared common interest that all members of our community be capable of leading flourishing lives, that they be treated with dignity and respect. To diminish the flourishing of others, to disrespect their dignity in the name of the common good, is to fundamentally misunderstand what makes the common good common. It also fundamentally misunderstands what it means to pursue a good life, of which membership within a flourishing political community of equals is essential. Other definitions of the common good are based on reaching economic vision and or attaining the goals that many advocacy groups fight for. Still, other people believe that the common good means creating something of a homogeneous society, or taking the big ideas or aims of discrete groups, or reducing them to something more universally palatable. Human beings exist in a world that is increasingly connected through technology and economy, and yet we have been unable to develop or to come to a shared perception of the common good. Well, the Christian social vision, our definition of the common good, springs from a profound sense of the mystery of the human person as the image of God. Indeed, the human being, above all creatures, is the living image of God. And we see this in the creation stories, depicting God's sheer delight in creating us. We are the pinnacle of God's creation. Perhaps the human characteristic that most reflects God's image is our desire to love. God creates each of us with a great personal worth. So all people, whatever their ethnicity, their social status, their ability or disability, are of personal worth and intrinsically loved by God. When we demonstrate the power of sacrificial love or the love of forgiveness, we experience the astonishing power of God's love reflected in us. When we love as God loves, especially in the most unlikely places and circumstances, people can experience the character of God. The more we permit God's Spirit to love through people to us, the greater will be the witness of God's image in this world. In Jesus, we learn the shape and size of God's love. In his eye, everyone is a child of God with an inherent dignity, and everyone deserves a chance for a better future. This is clear in the way Jesus engaged with the poor. The poor were the focus of his ministry and the center of his mission. Indeed, the poor were the vital milieu in which Jesus manifested the presence and the power of God. They belong to him. So if we want to follow Jesus, we have to do in our own situation the equivalent of what he did in his. We cannot live outside the world of the poor in one way or another. We have to walk with the poor as Jesus walked with them and they with him. So we are only as strong as our weakest links. This is why it is so important for the church, for us, to advocate on behalf of the poor. Only when things go well for the poor will they go well for the rest of us. But things will not go well for our weakest links so long as the organizing principle of the community is the survival of the fittest, is the race to the top at all costs. This is a competition model that inevitably favors the socially advantaged, the intellectually gifted, the best positioned. As a result, the gap between the advantaged and the disadvantaged will grow. In such a situation, there is no room for working together or mutual emulation or seeking the common good. The ties that bind us in mutual and horizontal commitment is dissolved. In the war of all against all, which is what the competition model is, and often that is the default model of our Western society. The poor are rejected as walking companions and even considered as disposable. The hallmark of our discipleship can be seen in how we make the love of God real in our relationships, and how we serve the most vulnerable brothers and sisters, and how we break down divisions that undermine human dignity and solidarity of our communities. The option for the poor requires that all our endeavors, social, educational, pastoral, seek not only to have justice done for the poor, but to help the poor themselves to become agents of their own destiny. I speak now of what is known as the relationship between common good and the universal destination of goods. So, common good and common goods, if you like. The common good is reached when we work together to improve the well-being of people in our society and the wider world. in line with Catholic social teaching, the rights of individual to personal possessions and community resources or commons must be balanced with the needs of the disadvantaged and the dispossessed. The Catechism makes it clear that for the sake of the common good, it requires respect for the universal destination of goods and respect for the right to private property. So Christian life strives to order this world's goods to God and to fraternal charity. This principle is extremely important, especially in places like Australia, where we often defend the rights to private property almost always without question. The right to private property must be conditioned, must be balanced by the right of all to have a just share in the universe's material goods, or the ecological commons, if you like. There is a sense in which the principle of the common good requires the goods of this world to be justly shared for all. There's a legend of St. Francis of Assisi who chanced upon a poor beggar, and Francis was traveling with his companions, and as soon as he saw this beggar, he took off his mantle and placed it on the shoulders of the beggar before him, and he said to his traveling companions that the mantle justly belongs to the beggar. So he intuitively understood that principle of the destination of goods, because they belong, goods of the earth belong to all. Its namesake, 800 years later, reminds us of this. Because in Laudato Si, it says, the principle of the subordination of private property to the universal destination of goods, and thus the rights of everyone to their use, is a golden rule for social conduct, and the first principle of the whole ethical and social order. Indeed, the social function of property is grounded in Scripture and the living tradition of the Church. In the Old Testament, God is presented as the sole owner of the land, and he apportions, he distributes it to the people as its stewards. To care for the land, in Pope Francis's words, to care for our common home is the duty of all. This duty entails a religious and social dimension. One's land or property must be used for tithing, for offering sacrifice, for giving alms to the poor. A pertinent theme for land. Legislation on interest-taking, gleaning, and the sabbatical year emphasizes the social responsibility of those holding private property. I'd like to highlight in particular the sabbatical tradition that is related to the care of the poor, the indebted, and the oppressed. In exile, the observance of Sabbath became an intentional discipline that distinguished the membership of the covenant community to that of the empire. You know, we think observance of the Sabbath is a matter of a spiritual relationship with God. It's a cultic duty. But truly, the observance of the Sabbath isn't primarily cultic. It is primarily political and social. Think of Sabbath or rest on the Sabbath as an act of defiance, as a work stoppage, as a statement that we live by another golden rule as opposed to the rule of the empire. And that's what keeping Sabbath is so vitally important. It was pivotal for the formation of a community that God intended. A community where there'd be no permanent underclass. So the Sabbath or the Jubilee is a kind of a reset. It's a kind of acknowledgement that we all have equal dignity. There's no underclass among us, which is so radical and so countercultural in the context of the exile. So the practice of sabbatical rest and jubilee stood in sharp contrast with the exploitation and grab what you can modus operandi of the empire. Yet it was the practice that maintained human dignity, long-term sustainability, and fruitfulness. Today we must turn away from imperial values of domination and extraction and recover the sabbatical values of regeneration, reciprocity, and conviviality. Our spiritually alienated society based on an economic model of constant growth and productivity is open all hours. People have to find their own form of Sabbath, wrote Pope Francis. In Laudato Si', he acknowledges the Jewish origins and importance also for us Christians of the concept of Sabbath. Rest opens our eyes to the larger picture and gives us renewed sensitivity to the rights of others. And so the day of rest centered on the Eucharist sheds its light on the whole week, motivates us to greater concern for nature and the poor. In the New Testament, many sayings of Jesus addresses the use of property. The Beatitudes, for instance, identify those God has a special concern for. They are the hungry, the sorrowful, the oppressed, the persecuted. The ideal picture of the primitive community in Acts shows Christians so bound together in selfless love that they voluntarily hold all things in common, so that those in need have their share. The motive behind the Christian attitude toward property is clear. The conviction that this community, founded on Jesus' love and his twofold command, must be a fellowship of brothers and sisters. The universal destination of goods has been affirmed powerfully by the Church in more recent times. At the Second Vatican Council, the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World, Government Affairs, makes the strongest statement on the common purpose of created things. It says, God intended the earth and all it contains for the use of every human being and people. Whatever forms of ownership may be, attention must always be paid to the universal purpose for which created goods are meant. John Paul II, in Centesimus Annus, that is 100 years after Pope Leo VIII's Rerum, he calls the right to the common use of goods the first principle of the whole ethical and social order and the characteristic principle of the Christian social doctrine. The universal destination of goods is not a figure of speech found in the church's social teaching. It is a reality prior to property. Property, especially when it affects natural resources, must always serve the needs of peoples. So the church is called to be the conscience of society and the voice of justice in the world that prioritizes wealth, power, and individualism over charity and the common good. When public responsibility is on the wane and the most privileged desperately work to improve their private estate, we, like our ancestors in faith of all, are called to be an economy of solidarity, an economy that takes care of all, especially the poorest among us. Given that we are likely to become a minority in the future, our call is not to batten down the hatches and circle the wagons, but to be a critical list for the critical times ahead by modeling a new way of being together for the sake of the poor and God's creation. Not long ago, I happened to listen to a speech by the Chief Executive Women's President, Sam Austin, during her National Press Club address. And she outlined in that address her vision for an inclusive post-pandemic economy and society, that is Australia. Drawing the lesson from the pandemic, Austin said that it is the human and social infrastructure of the care economy that has been shown to falter. What is the care economy? Well, it is what sustains life. It involves childcare, elder care, education, healthcare, and the kind of work that you are involved in. It can be personal, social, and domestic services that are provided in both paid and unpaid forms within formal or informal sectors. Austin argued that our care economy has faltered, not just because we have not sufficiently invested in it, but even more fundamentally because we see the care economy as secondary to the profit economy. In addition to capitalizing on those lessons by putting care at the center of the economy, Austin asked the question that I think every Catholic should reflect upon in terms of its relevance to the Church. She asked, what would our country look like if we began reimagining a society that truly celebrates care and invests in its women? A country that ensures opportunities for women and men alike, that treats women with decency and respect. That is our basic human rights. To me, an analogous question that we can ask ourselves in the context of searching for a new way of being church is, what does our church look like if we began to imagine or reimagine a church that celebrates and empowers women and men disciples to exercise their God-given gifts for the life of the world? Or to put it differently, what does our church look like when its structures and relationships are configured in such a way that we can be the source of hope for people and for the planet? I think it's a very relevant question indeed, because it lies at the heart of what we call a synodal church that Pope Francis is leading us towards. For me, synodality is about participation, agency, and discipleship. Synodality is premised on this core notion that everyone has equal dignity and equal rights to participate in the mission of the Church by virtue of our baptism. So the time has come to apply the Trinitarian theological framework as the basis for restructuring the church as a circular, symbiotic, and cooperative relational paradigm rather than a linear, pyramidic power structure. Trinitarian theology today stresses love, equality, and distinction as a key to our attempt to grasp the meaning of a relational God, linking our faith with action for the environment. The Trinity is the template for restructuring of the church, that the equality of all its members is lived rather than emphasizing the pyramidic power. Only in such a church will everyday Catholics come to recognize that their lives offer countless opportunities for ministry. So the church must continue to embody what I call the alternative relational paradigm. This alternative relational paradigm turns the world system of power structures on its head because it is rooted in the biblical narrative of the new social order of radical inclusion, justice, and equality. We cannot be a prophetic voice if we fail to be a model egalitarian community where those disadvantaged on account of their race, their gender, their social status, their ability or disability find empowerment for a dignified life. We can draw inspiration from our forebears like Mary MacKillop and countless other men and women of courage and generosity who model another way of living and sharing. In the world where the rules are often made by the strong and the structure of power intrinsically favor the privileged, they embody the boundary-breaking spirit of Jesus. They mirror God's kingdom, or kingdom, if you like, where those socially marginalized were brought to the table and in turn contributed to a more inclusive, caring society that is Australia today. So, in conclusion, we live in a particularly polarized time. In some countries, partisan politics is so entrenched, it threatens to undermine social cohesion and unravel the fabric of a democratic society. Australia, a lucky country, is not totally immune from these global trends. Ideological positions are widening on every issue, whether it's immigration, the environment, gender, or the voice for Indigenous Australians. As Catholics, we are called more than ever to listen, to discern, and to act with Christian wisdom, integrity, and truth. It is more important than ever that we do not lose sight of our calling, which, according to the Second Vatican Council, is to be a sacrament of God's love, a vehicle of the good news for the world. The early Christians understood this and showed a way forward in how they lived, how they related, and especially in how they shared resources. In the face of a fractured society, they shone as a community of radical inclusivity, hospitality, and justice against the dominant system of exploitation, self-interest, greed, and power. They enacted a completely different ethos, an ethos of communion and compassion. The church was transformed beyond the original company that Jesus had gathered, and yet this creative process remained faithful to its core values. We are a community grounded in God's love. Despite all of our failings and distortions, individually and institutionally, we hold God's power for love and for life. The church is a place where large dreams are entertained, songs are sung, boundaries are crossed, hope is noticed, the weak are honored and redignified. We, of course, have no monopoly on these matters, yet we take this agenda as our primary mission. We raise the human questions of justice, reconciliation, peace, of welcome, friendship, hospitality, and love. You are the light of the world, a city built on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. These words of Jesus summon us to be a prophetic community that shines a light on the darkness of the world around us. We draw our strength and inspiration from the crucified Christ and the power of the Spirit. We can not only envision a different world to the fractured, polarized, and destructive one we are living in, but we can also live it out and be a beacon of hope. In an increasingly post-Christian society, we can exercise a faithful and creative discipleship without bitterness or nostalgia, and perhaps even with the joy of the gospel. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Bishop Vincent. A wide-ranging piece, a lot of thinking around a range of domains there. And I might not let you sit down over there quite yet, because I think we'll try and have a few questions for you. You want to come and sit here, and I'll get another mic and we'll have a think through this, because for me, as you were speaking, there's a broad range of social services represented here. There's a broad range of organisations doing much work, so maybe we could spend the next 15 minutes drilling into a few questions from the audience, but having a think about perhaps what our role here, the people who are working and doing within this broader vision that you've articulated. And perhaps I'll start with just a bit of a cheeky question, because this came up in one of our steering committee. As I mentioned, there's many things this conference can't cover given the time, but I think this is an interesting one. But sort of talked about the Sabbath and the Jubilee and that being sort of a part of working generally. And noticed that Oxfam, who are fairly well-known NGO, they've moved to the 4-day work week going forward, I think, for a range of reasons, but thinking about what's the right relations for work, what's the right balance thing. But our organisations here and our large employers, we've got, in Victoria alone, there's 8,000 staff across Catholic social services, and some 14,000 people who volunteer their time as well alongside that. But it's quite a different dynamic shift within our professional organisations. Yeah, wondering about that notion of that Sabbath, the reset, the Jubilee, and perhaps how do we model the right relationship between work, the dignity of work, the connection, and this notion that's sort of come up as perhaps a four-day working week in the not-for-profit environment. I'll just grab perfect. Thanks. I'll give you this. Any thoughts on that? Yourself.
Well, as I said, the practice of Sabbath was fundamentally a social and political exercise. Pharaoh wanted the Jews to make bricks and mortar, and he appointed hard taskmasters to make sure that the Jews carried out their work. So the philosophy or the social vision of Pharaoh was all about profit and gain, accumulation of wealth, you know. But the Jews, under the guidance of the covenant God, proclaimed a different vision. And Sabbath was the demonstration, the expression of that social vision, because Sabbath is about caring for each other, even for the animals, you know. So even the beasts of burdens could rest on the Sabbath, let alone human beings. So I think that's a very fundamentally cultural vision, and how do we reenact that vision today in the context of a different, different world, but nevertheless, we are also ruled, I believe, fundamentally by the profit-based economy. And the profit-based economy is all about accumulation, profit, and we are faithful to our biblical narrative. Then I think we have to put more care into the way we do economy. And beginning with our own organization. Did you have a policy that accords women, especially childbearing women or women with young children? What is a family-friendly organization that we should be? Because being a family-friendly organization is part of that social vision that is grounded in the biblical narrative. The four that they're working with, well, I'm not one to spell out details, but I would say, we start with that vision of an economy that respects the inherent dignity of every person, of every staff member, of every person that we come in contact with, including our clients. Then I think we have a sound basis for the organisational structure.
Thanks, Bishop. My name's Vicky and I'm from Mercy Care in Perth. I really enjoyed listening, and it made me a lot to think about our own organisation and how we think about our growth, our property, even our sense of how do we model an egalitarian community, how are we inclusive, and how do we share leadership. And I really like to challenge for us to think about how we embody that as a community, because that's a witness to the world, the rest of the world. And I just can't, I feel and sit here and go, with the wider community that I may be part of, being a Catholic community, doesn't necessarily always model that egalitarian community, that inclusive environment in how leadership is shared and how we do that. So we're trying to be this model of a Catholic social service organisation, true to our Catholic identity and ethos, but when the wider Catholic community sometimes isn't showing that, it's a really hard place for Catholic service organisations for us to be drawing and being. I was wondering if you had any commentary on that, any reflections on how we hold that challenge and contradiction, because the world, yes, is not valuing, in some parts of the world need this work, but also the world that the churches and our organisations are part of.
Well, I believe that we are held to higher standards, but that doesn't mean that we, as a Catholic organization is necessarily better than the non-Catholic counterpart. In fact, if anything, the whole concept of the church in the world is that we not only look to the biblical narrative as our inspiration and a template for engaging with the plethora of social issues, but also I think we will need to look around us and the sexual abuse crisis has shown that we must, or at least institutionally, the church wasn't the responsible citizen that we claim to be, let alone the best citizen. So we had a lot to learn from civil societies, and and so I'm not one to kind of to call for a fortress kind of mentality, because if we did that, I think that would condemn us to irrelevance. Yes, I do think that in interacting, in being open to learn from others, including civil societies, that we can be a better citizen, we can be a better partner, we can be a better vehicle to gospel work.
Bishop, do you see a place for the Roman Catholic Church or church organisations to lobby against obvious current injustices, for instance, the current petroleum resources and rent tax, which endows the fossil fuel corporate oligarchy with billions in annual profits? This compares to the Norwegian tax system, which is structured to give each taxpayer $100,000 in revenue. Do you see an opportunity for the Roman Catholic Church and Christian services to lobby for change in this obvious and achievable change in legislation?
Tax reform.
Tax reform, well, that's way beyond my pay grade. I think the principle of option for the poor and care for our coming home ought to guide us. I think one of the goals that we should set for ourselves in every organization, including the diocese, is to how to extract yourselves from dependency on fossil fuel economy. So we should decolonize our institution. That should be the end. In fact, this is one of the objectives within our policy, that we move towards a decarbonization of the way we do things, so that we we give, we exercise our custodianship of, or stewardship of our common home, and at the same time also to address the issues of inequality. That often the profit-based economy inevitably produces.
We have time for just one more question. I think in the middle here it's got it. Got the ticket.
Vincent. I really enjoyed listening to you, Bishop Long. Thank you very much. And I was inspired by your words, inviting a different perspective on voice and advocacy for everybody in the activity of church. I work in Catholic secondary college, and amidst an increasing number of students who are unchurched, whose families are unchurched, we know that they will rally for the things that they are passionate about. Recent activities in our state with regard to environmental peace have seen huge numbers of students want to, show their passion. So how can we in Catholic education and church inspire them to be passionate about Catholic social teaching and the things that we would wish for them for the future, because they tend to be showing a whole lot of apathy at school level for church. They don't see their voices heard, they don't see a place for them in Catholic Church. So what can we do to inspire that?
Yeah, it is a conundrum for all of us, but particularly for leaders, like myself, because on the one hand, they value a certain aspects of the church, especially its commitment to social justice, its stands for the poor, the oppressed, the vulnerable. But on the other, they don't see the relevance of a male-dominated institution, to name just one, and how do we form their conscience? How do we guide them using Catholic social teaching to move them towards being better stewards of our common home, voices for the poor and the marginalized. I think that's something that we can work towards, the richness of Catholic social teaching, and especially now we have the leadership of a Pope who is so oriented towards the transformation of the world towards a more sustainable future, a more equitable society. I think these are some of the things that we can continue to work towards equipping the younger generation, even if we don't have all the answers for all the questions that they raise.
Well run. Let's give Bishop Vincent a round of applause and many thanks.